Are you having a hard time figuring out what to get Dad for Father's Day? You should check out Row 1 Brand's Vintage Pictorum Gallery. They have America's best sports art. With over 7,200 historic sports prints, you're assured to find something unique for Dad this Father's Day. Instead of a boring old tie, get him a historic baseball photo taken by Henry High Sandham at the historic Polo Grounds Stadium in New York City during the 1894 Temple Cup. Or, if he's an NFL buff, check out the 1963 vintage NFL poster. These are so good looking that you'll be amazed how they turn out. Shop now at sportshistorynetwork.com/row1 and save 15% off your order.
You know, sometimes in life it's just the little things that matter. And in the case of our guest today, it's a small annual marketing booklet on sports that brought a family bond closer between a father and a son. A link that'll be a memory for a lifetime. We talk about it more with Mark Speck in just a moment. Hi, my name's Darren Hayes, and I know you've heard me on the Pigskin Dispatch talking about football history for years. Well, now I'm on a new mission, a quest to find sports history in other sports as well as football by learning through the jerseys and the apparel and the gear that the players wore and the franchises supplied their teams. It's an educational trip, and I'm taking you with me day by day, player by player, uniform by uniform. The Sports Jersey Dispatch.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Hello, my sports friends. This is Darren Hayes of the Sports Jersey Dispatch podcast. Welcome once again to the Pig Pen, your portal to all things good in sports history. And we have a really special guest today. And before I introduce him, I just want to say a little caveat of how I came upon him. I've seen him quite a bit on social media, and recently he and some others were talking about a publication from the late 60s and early 70s that just they were really passionate about. And I said, I really got to find out more about this, and I'm sure the audience would like to hear about it too. So we have Mark Speck with us today. Mark Speck, welcome to the Pig Pen.
All right, thank you, Darren. It's good to see you, and thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Well, this is quite an honor here. I've seen quite a bit of your chats on many of the social medias, mainly pertaining to football. We're both PFRA members. We've never met in person. Hope to do that soon. But this particular instance, you're talking about a different sport and a different publication. I guess I'll let you introduce the publication and the sport, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, it was something called Kessler Baseball Fans Guide, and it came out in the spring. And it was, I've heard it was in in bars, given out free, and also at liquor stores, because it was Kessler Whiskey sponsored it. They put it together, and my dad in the late 60s at one point came home. He would stop, he worked down about an hour away from us in central PA. And he came down, he would stop after work at a bar, not get, maybe grab a pizza for us, bring it home, and he'd have a couple drinks. But they would, I guess it started out, they said, "Hey, does your son like baseball?" And he goes, "Yeah." And so he gave him this fans guide, brought it home. He said, here you go. And it really surprised me because I wasn't really aware that my dad was really paying attention to the fact that I really like sports, statistics, that kind of thing, but he must have. And I read through it. It was like 35 pages. It had like a little 1-page article on each team. It would have like a little capsule of each, pitching, catching, outfield, infield, that kind of thing. Then a kind of a summary. Had the whole schedule. And then he would have like a roster, and then he would have like the diagram of the home field, Wrigley Field, Three Rivers, whatever it was, and it would have like a seating chart, have what the tickets were, what the dimensions of the ballpark were, that kind of thing, where the games could be seen and heard on radio. It really packed a lot of information in one little tiny 35-page booklet, which was not any bigger than probably 5 by 7. it was really small, maybe 8x10. I might be pushing it with that. Maybe 6x9. Let's go with that.
So it's like a Reader's Digest size, basically.
Yeah, and it was really something. So I read it and I just, and I absorbed everything in it. It was one of my first experiences with statistics and sports statistics. And then I started buying the sporting news, and that was just like the Bible. Anybody who likes statistics probably got started with that. Box scores, football, scores, and they had the box scores in football, basketball, even the ABA, the NHL, the WHA. So you got it all in just one magazine. And it just really started me on this road that I've taken to be with football research and sports research in general. But it was just, to me, it was just amazing. And it was just kind of a connection I had with my dad. I don't know, we all kind of have kind of a tough time growing up with our dads. You kind of want to make sure you please him. You want to make sure you're the son that he wants you to be, and that kind of thing. And you don't know sometimes. I know my dad didn't talk a whole lot, so you didn't know, am I pleasing him? Am I doing enough stuff for him? And I probably should have done more, because he would give me the money for the sporting news. He'd say, hey, we'd stop at the local newsstand, Singleton's, in town, and we'd stop there after church, pull in. He said, here, get a paper. Here, get yourself a sporting news. So I'm like, okay, you helped me a lot this week. Here, get a sporting news. So he's like, and then, looking back, I wish I'd have helped him more. I'd have probably got one each week. I might have got a subscription out of him. I don't know, but, it was just the idea. You're a kid. You're not thinking of that. You're thinking about school and your friends and girls and that kind of thing. So, but, I wish I would have helped him out a lot more than I did. But, it was just, and this Kessler, it's like I said, this fans guide really got me started on the whole thing, as far as going down this road with all these, they had the stats, not really very much in depth, but they had like their record for the past season, as a pitcher, and then, maybe their career record. They would have that with all the position players. They have like they hit 275 in 1970, but their career record is like 250 or whatever. So it was just really interesting to read. And like I said, I had not really given much thought to sports statistics before this, but it was thanks to my dad and getting this thing he probably picked up for free when he's buying a pizza. Here, take this, give it to your son. And he got it for me for, 4 or 5 years, 6 years, something like that, until I got, a later teen. And, he probably figured I wasn't really that interested anymore. And I probably would have been. And I guess they put it out till the early 2000s, which I didn't find out till later. And they actually had started it back in the 50s. So it had been put out for quite a few years, and I didn't buy it again. I guess, as you get older, you kind of, your interest again start going down to things. And, you get out of high school, you get the job, and then you go to college and that kind of thing. And, things change with you. And, I still retained that idea of statistics, but in a different avenue. But, it was out. I see it on eBay, and they have the 1990s versions, early 2000s. So it must have been pretty popular. But yeah, it was a really interesting, like I said, just a little 35-page book. At the beginning, they would have, the pennant winners all through the years. They would have the leading batters for the last year, the lifetime batters, the lifetime pitchers, and then the last year's pitchers, what their records were and that kind of thing. They had, the award winners. It had a lot of stuff in it. I mean, it was packed full of stuff. And I just was really, and again, I think we all have this. Any of us who are sports fans who collected baseball cards or anything else, somehow they got lost in the shuffle, except for one, 1971, and I kept, and I still have. But I've been able to get on eBay or go into antique flea market kind of things, secondhand stores, and I actually found them all the way from 69 all the way to 75. So all the ones that I had, I have now, because, my mom threw out all my comic books, all my baseball cards. I think we all go through that. And so I've got them all. I sit down and read them. If I've got, it's baseball season and I've got nothing to do, I'll just pull one out, look through it, and what they talked about, and it's great to look back. And I think this was with any magazine, like the Street and Smiths, which was another one I got into, the football and the baseball. It's good to look back and see what their predictions were like. They predicted the Phillies to win that year. Are they crazy? That kind of thing. They must have had an idea or a reason for it. But I thought that, but it's interesting to go back both in football and baseball and basketball and hockey. I've got them all. I've got magazines of all of them. And it's just interesting to go back and see what their predictions were like and how accurate they were. Sometimes they were okay. And sometimes, they kind of missed a boat, but that happens. I can't do it, so I can't really, criticize them for not getting everything right, because I probably would have done worse. So, yeah, it's really an interesting little magazine. And I finally got the last one. That's why I posted it. It was in 1970. And I finally got that one the week before. And we ordered it on eBay. It was like $5. You really they don't really cost a whole lot if you can find a good deal. And it was like $5, and it was like a couple of bucks for shipping. Came, and it was in perfect condition, and it came in within a few days. So, and I've been looking over that one because it's talking about the Mets, the amazing Mets and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's an amazing little book. And I think I don't know if anybody out there has it or has read it or would like to, but I think if you're interested in sports history and sports statistics, especially baseball, they did have a football one. I just wasn't into that one at the time, which is amazing considering I'm now, Mr. Football Research and doing it for the last, since 1988, I think was when I really got serious about it. But I got a couple of those. I found them, it's again, secondhand stores, flea markets, that kind of thing. And they dealt mostly with the colleges. So it didn't really go into pro football. So it was more the college end of it. So it really wasn't, and I really wasn't interested in college football at the time, more in the pros. And I've got a few of those. But yeah, the baseball ones, I don't know if I'd ever want to go back and get some of the ones I never had. I'm not sure. Maybe someday I will. I don't know if I can find some of them. It'd be interesting to look at them to see if they changed their format at all. If they kept that format, with everything in one page for each team, and see if, maybe get one from the 90s or something like that maybe just to see if they kept that same format, because it was really an interesting format and very streamlined to where you could get all this information on one tiny little page, and the whole entire schedule, the records, the seating diagram, and a little capsule of the team. Yeah, I mean, it was an amazing book to read, and like I said, it gave me a connection with my dad that I may not have gotten anywhere else. I mean, like I said, it wasn't difficult, but it was just one of those, you just don't know how things are. And, my dad at his age, they never showed a lot of affection and that kind of thing. Very reticent and very quiet. And I always tried to get him to talk about when he was in World War II over in the Pacific. And he never, he said, well, one day a Japanese plane flew over and we all shot at it and missed it. And that's all he ever told me. And I'm sure he was involved in more than that. But it's just, that's the way they were, that they just didn't talk about things like that. I never was able to get him out of, get anything out of him as anything for more information that, that might have affected him. I mean, I'm sure that going through that experience probably affected him in a certain way. I had an uncle who was in Europe and was one of the guys that, liberated the concentration camps and saw all that going on. And I'm sure that affected him. I talk to my cousin every once in a while. And she says that. She says she wishes she had some of the mementos that he had. But, it's just that way of that in that certain time, I guess, late 60s, early 70s, to where you're like, am I doing the right thing for him? And that gave us a connection that he kept up for, like I said, several years. And he would buy, say, here, buy yourself a Sporting News. He'd give me money and I would get like the Street and Smiths, magazine. And that was another amazing magazine. And, you got that. They had everything in there. But yeah, but Kessler's always stayed in my heart because I had that in 1971. They had a baseball glove on the cover. It was red and black. And it just had, Kessler Baseball Fans Guide, 1971. They had like different pictures. It was mostly like artwork. They didn't go into the photographs or anything. I don't know if maybe they couldn't get probably to keep the costs down. They didn't want to get into like trademarks and registered and that kind of thing and have to deal with that kind of thing or with Major League Baseball and use their images. So they just kind of like had an artwork kind of a thing on the front and just went through it. And, you had to, of course, the Kessler whiskey ad on the back, which makes sense. They put it out. So they're going to, try to get a little bit of a push in for themselves. So, yeah, it was very interesting. And I really, really enjoyed it. I still do. Like I said, I still pick it up and look at it. And like I said, it's interesting to look back and see how accurate they were. And a lot of times they were. And, that's not an easy thing to do because there's always something that comes. Sure, in 68, I think, or 69. I can't remember where they had the Mets. I'd have to look that up. But I'm sure they didn't have them in first place. And if they did, they were one of the few, to win it in 69. So, but yeah, very interesting little magazine. I think if you're a baseball fan and you like to collect things like that, I think it is a nice collectible. Again, I found them on very cheap on eBay where you can get them for like $5 or $6, which isn't bad. Because you could just try to get the Pro Football Weekly, and it's anywhere from $12 to $22 for one issue. So I mean, it's a great magazine, yeah, and I have some of them, but how much of those can you collect unless you're win the lottery or something? So anyway, so yeah, great little magazine, and I like it a lot. And like I said, and also not only that, and getting me down the road. Studying statistics and doing research, but also having a connection with my dad that he actually noticed that I was doing that and realized that, and he'd pick on me. I'd be sitting there with a bunch of stuff around and he'd go, oh, there's Mark with the statistics again. But, and I put that in the first book that I read as far as the quote, dedicated to him just because of that. And he said it jokingly. It wasn't like being mean or anything. He was just, there he is sitting there with his stats again. And I said, well, it finally paid off, Dad. After all that time, you tripping over it or walking past me with it, it paid off. So, yeah, great little magazine, a great memory. Again, not only that, not only just, Street and Smiths and all those other things that I have. They're great to have, but they don't have that memory of a connection with my dad that Kessler's.
That's the most important thing is, having a connection with your father or a grandfather, but yours have that special bond. And I'm sure that has to bring, the great memories of Kessler's, baseball guide. And that's probably why it's so important to you. And it's that's great that you can, recapture some of that by getting some of those copies that, got lost through time or, mom threw away or whatever, but you probably didn't realize the importance of it. And you probably didn't realize the importance till you're older. I had a similar experience. My dad got me, that whole generation was very stoic. My dad, was born during World War II, so he wasn't in the war, but he was still very stoic. And, my dad's still with us, but, one connection we always had was sports, but he bought me probably in 1977, 78. He gave me a copy of the NFL record book. It was like a paperback book. It was probably, inch and a half thick and, very popular at the time. But I think I read that thing till the pages were falling out, and it's probably still around here somewhere, or somebody threw it out because it looks like a hunk of garbage by now. But I always had a special bond to that. And that really, like you, it set me on a path of, baseball cards and football cards and, Street and Smiths and, everything you get your hand on, the sporting news. I mean, people that are, younger than 35 probably don't appreciate how important these magazines were to youth that was interested in football and adults that were interested in football, because we didn't have the internet. Couldn't turn on a TV channel that had 24-hour sports. It was, you had to wait till 6 o'clock, 20 after 6 when the sports came on the news, or, if you were allowed to stay up past 11 to watch that news, that was it. That was your sports. And then Sundays or when the ball games were on, and, or the newspaper. And people that are younger that don't remember before the internet just can't appreciate that. And I think that's a really special thing that you had with your dad. And I think that's really great. That's a really cool thing. I guess now you brought up something. You have some books that you wrote. Maybe if you could tell us a little bit about those.
Yeah. Again, it was around 88 when I started. I joined a PFRA some years after that, but actually it wasn't that far after that. My ex-wife gave me that for a present for Christmas or something, was this subscription to it, a membership to the PFRA. And I thought when I was starting to research the WFL, World Football League from the 70s, I thought I was the only person doing it. Nobody else is that crazy out here looking at, the old microfilm machines that look like about as big as a video game. And you're putting the winding that thing on there and you're going through all these old newspapers and looking at it, your eyeballs are about ready to implode. And doing that, and I'm thinking, nobody else is doing this. Well, then I joined the PFRA and I found out there's this whole group of people that are doing it, and one of them was Todd Mayer, who had put out a book through PFRA about the WFL, which was kind of the precursor to the WFL encyclopedia, which him and I worked on. He asked me to help him with it. And we put it out. I think it came out in 2006. And it still sells to this day. And some people swear it's the Bible of the World Football League. A lot of great reviews on Amazon that it had statistics. It had blurbs about each team. It had rosters, coaches, drafts, a player register at the end. So it was pretty, again, another small book that really packed a lot of information. And so then we got that done. And, we had gone through St. Johann Press up in New Jersey. And, so I didn't really think about anything about that after a while. And I was just happy to see that it was out, kind of proud of it. And so then I got an idea, you know what? I want to write another book. But I wanted to write about the Florida Blazers. And that was the team that they were in the WFL. And they got paid for like the first 7 weeks, and then the check stopped. They started bouncing. And for the last 13 weeks of the season, these guys didn't get paid. They kept playing. They kept winning. They'd vote whether or not they would play. They said, no, we're going to keep playing. We're professionals. We've got pride. And Jack Pardee, who was the coach, it was his first coaching job, first year as a head coach, just kept that team together. And I just thought that was a great story. So I ran it by Dave Beisel, who's the head of St. Johann. He loved it. I put it together and made and wrote a book, came out, and it has done well. So it just started me on, let's keep this going. So I then wrote a book about the entire WFL, which was, covered every team. It was mostly narrative. It wasn't a lot of stats. It wasn't a lot of rosters and that kind of thing. But it was a narrative of each team, some of the personalities in the league, that kind of thing. And again, it's selling fairly well. Then I wanted to do a book. I'm coming up with ideas as I'm going. Like I said, I'm going to keep throwing at Dave until he says, no, I don't want to hear any more ideas. So he didn't say that. So he just kept saying, yeah, that sounds good. Let's do it. The next one was about a semi-pro team that was actually from central Pennsylvania. And you may remember them. I think they played Erie a couple of times, a semi-pro team, the Erie Express, I think they were.
Yeah, the Erie Express.
Yeah. And they were called the Central Pennsylvania Whitetail Bucks, which has to be the longest name in the history of sports, I think. I mean, they spelled the entire thing out. And they came around about 75. And I said, I want to always write a book about these guys. I never went to any games. I should have, because they played in State College, where Penn State is. They played in Altoona. They played in, all these little towns around the area that had players. And a lot of the players that played on the team played my high school in football. They were on like Glendale High School and Moshannon Valley and that kind of thing. So it was a connection there that, it was a local guys playing on a local team. It wasn't guys from New New York or Texas or California or whatever it might be. It was local guys. And I told it to Dave. Dave said, yeah, let's go with it. It sounds good. And it's done very well. I interviewed a ton of the guys from the team because most of them still lived around the Altoona State College area, which I found out through the interviews. There was kind of a little bit of a rivalry between the Altoona guys and the State College guys. They kind of, it wasn't that they didn't get along, but we were the ones that really kept the team going. No, we were the ones. It was not those State College. So, but I interviewed like a group of both, and just the greatest bunch of guys. I really think they had thought they were forgotten. I mean, their last game was in '78, and probably nobody had talked to them probably in years about it. I think they had an article from the 25th reunion they had, and that would have been at one point. But as far as that, but they were just open, and I called it playing for a hoagie and a beer. And I wish I could say I came up with the title, but it was one of the players who did. I was interviewing him, and he said, you know what, Mark, playing for that team was like playing for a hoagie and a beer. And I said, you know what, I may not be able to come up with a good title, but I know a good one when I hear it. So I that was the title. Just a great bunch of guys, really appreciated it. We had a team reunion not too long after it came out, and a bunch of the guys got together and had a great time. And we still stayed connected. We've had a couple of get-togethers since. So we had that book. Then I went back to the World Football League with another book, which was about the Detroit Wheels, who were another team that really had financial difficulties. Guys were living together just to save money. They were drying off with their T-shirts instead of towels in the locker room. Some guy asked for a shoelace and couldn't get one. And they had 33. The joke around was that they had 33 owners, but it was more 33 investors. And they didn't have that strong central owner who would take the reins and take over and make the decisions. So they would have these meetings every Friday and nothing would get done. Well, what do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? So they didn't have that strong character like an Al Davis, like a Jerry Jones, like a, Art Modell, somebody like that who would make the decision. All right, how are we doing? Are we on board with this? Okay, let's do it. We're doing it. And then maybe the problems wouldn't have become so intense and so significant as they went on, because guys were, like I said, they were trying to move families together. One coach was living in somebody else's basement because he couldn't get a place to live. Once they found out they were with the team, nobody'd rent to them because they knew they were not getting paid. I'm not going to get my rent from this guy. Sorry, I can't rent to you. So, and unfortunately, unlike the Blazers, they didn't have a lot of success. I think they won one game out of 14, and they finally finally folded them after a while, and some of their players got picked up in the dispersal draft. But again, that one got a lot of good reviews. And right now I'm waiting for the latest one to come out as a book on the San Antonio Wings, who played in 75, kind of switching gears. All these teams were 74, but I got on this team was 75. And, it was interesting because they had the San Antonio Toros, which were a semi-pro team who had been around for about a decade and were great. I mean, one year their record was 20 wins and 1 loss. I mean, they won every year. If a league they were in folded, the owner of the team would figure out, either find another league or make one himself. And they just kept playing every year, no matter what league. It was like the Continental League. They were in a Texas League, the Trans-American League, the Southwestern League, the Mid-America League. So they kept playing. And so then they came along with this Toros, who were actually, they were the Wings, excuse me. They came along with the San Antonio Wings, who were, actually kind of the remnants of the Florida Blazers. They got the rights to the Blazers players and got that. And then they found an owner who wasn't the guy who owned the Toros. They probably should have gotten him Henry Height, because he, had run this team. As the one guy said, his checks didn't have a lot of zeros in them, but they never bounced. The guys always got paid. They didn't lose their shirts literally or anything like that. And I think Gary Davidson did talk to him, the commissioner, the founder of the WFL, but he wanted to run the team his way. and he didn't want that. He said, nah. And he didn't trust Davidson, didn't think it was run right, which he was in the end was correct about. And they came to him again in 75 to see if he'd own the wings. And he said, no, I want to run it my way. No, you got to use this Chris Hemeter, who was the president of the league. He came up with a Hemeter plan, which was kind of like a share of the gate kind of a thing where the players would be played a certain amount, would be paid a certain amount. And then, they would have, and so, but he didn't want that. He wanted to run it his way, which had been successful for about a decade. So they went ahead without him. Then he started to sue them. They sued him, and it was just a whole mess. And so, he had that kind of thing. And, I've kind of evolved to the point where, and this is all through my books, was that, yes, the statistics and finding these statistics, which is not easy with the WFL. If you've ever tried to research them, it is not easy. I mean, you can find some kind of sparse things here and there, some kind of partial game things, summaries, statistics. But as far as like full game, it's really tough to find. So, but I evolved past that. Like I said earlier, the statistics got me started on, that reading in the Kessler baseball guide, Street and Smith, Sporting News, that got me going. But then I evolved to the point where now the stories behind the statistics were just as interesting, if not more so, with these guys not being paid, with the things that were going on in the WFL, the quotes, some of the recollections of, not only like the Central PA team, but also the WFL teams, the things they went through, things they had to put up with, but the funny things that happened, the things that they did. Sometimes they actually literally got paid with beer on the Whitetail Bucks. They would just have like a case of beer or something on the bus. And, they would drive back, and one guy said, yeah, we'd come up to a stop sign. All the empty beer cans would roll to the front of the bus. The bus would pull out, and all the beer cans would roll to the back of the bus. And, but all these stories of what happened and some of the personalities just added another layer to the statistics, which again are interesting and love them to death. I still find statistics now, and it's amazing to still find things. Newspapers.com is an amazing resource, and but that has made it a lot more interesting as far as having that narrative of all the stories, the personalities, the different quotes. Some of them funny, some of them poignant, some of them sad, but having all that in there. And that gets me to the book I'm working on now, which is a second edition of the encyclopedia, which is going to be bigger in size, bigger in scope. I've got game summaries for all the games for both years, statistics, player register is going to be expanded to include more transactions, which is going to have a transaction section, which is, I'm thinking right now, probably about 225 pages long itself. I mean, with newspapers.com, I'm still finding them. And it's just, it's not just transactions, but, if somebody sued somebody, if somebody was hired, player signings, player getting cut, that's that kind of thing. But also, yes, they got the chance to lease this stadium or whatever it might have been, but it's up to like 225 pages just for that section alone. I'm not sure if Dave's going to be able to use all of it. I hope so. But recollections, there's a whole section of where I've interviewed people or talked to people or gotten their quotes in other areas, and that's about 100 pages right now. Quotes, I've got a quote section with all the different quotes, and a lot of other things, trivia, that kind of thing, names that maybe you weren't aware of. John Wayne supposedly was going to get a team, and he was going to call it the Dukes, which makes sense. Not the Pilgrims, but the Dukes. And there was rumors that Spiro Agnew and Frank Sinatra were going to own a team. With the Wheels, there were rumors that John DeLorean was going to buy the team. So there's all these names. There's a section that says, you might not know that these names were associated with the WFL, but they were. So yeah, it's going to be huge. We've worked on it now with my editor for over a year already, and we're still just on 74. We still have 75 to do because I don't know if you are familiar with the original encyclopedia. The team blurbs were like a page and a half. These are up to like 15 to 20 pages. So you've got that. The rosters have been updated because a lot of the numbers were missing, but I found a lot of those. I found a lot more drafts that they had. There's like an odds and ends section where I found like some of the lawsuits online with the details of those. The Chicago Fire fight song is in there. So it's a lot of different things in that section. So yeah, it's going to be really big. Again, I'm just throwing it out there. If Dave can put as much in it as he can, that's what we're hoping for. So yeah. So again, it goes back to that, that time in 1969 when my dad got that first one for me, and Kessler's baseball guide, and it really got me down that road of statistics, then evolving into, even though I read Ball 4 and North Dallas 40 and Sunday's Fools by Tom Beer, probably why I'm kind of jaded to this day with reading those books first. But it that kind of got me started. But then just doing the research with the WFL and the semi-pro stuff, and to me it's just fascinating. And I've written a lot of articles for the Coffin Corner for the PFRA. Not all of them dealt with the WFL. Some of them did. Some of them were the NFL. But that again was part of that whole thing, going back to that, getting that start. And thanks to my dad, getting that start with the Kessler baseball guide and going all the way through with all the different magazines and doing the research, looking these stuff up. Again, I'm still finding things. Last thing I've been working on right now, the last couple of days, is the last guys that played in the NFL that were in the WFL. Danny White, Gary Danielson, Tony Adams was a replacement player. He was a quarterback for the Southern California Sun in WFL, came back and was a replacement player in the 87 strike and played a couple games. But they were the kind of the last guys, the late 80s. They were the last guys that were really still in the league from the WFL. So, it's going to be a really big book. I think people are going to be interested in it. Is he even able to find information about some of the intra-squad games they played in 74 and 75? They play games, blue and white games or green and gold games or whatever it was, and get a little bit of detail, and not complete, obviously. But, this guy ran for so many yards. This guy caught him. This quarterback completed this. So, yeah, I think it's going to be really well received because it's just so much more information. And people like the original one, which does have a lot of information. This is going to have even more. And again, there was a lot of typos. There was a lot of mistakes. I've tried to correct all of those. And my poor editor, the book, we were working on it in the late 90s to early 2000s, and the book itself was on an old floppy disk, which you can't even use those anymore. You can't even find something to put those in. So the poor editor has been having to type the entire book and sending me so here's the section for the Hawaiians for 74. Okay, I'll look through it. I'll add my stuff to it, and I'll send it back to you. So that's what we're doing. The poor woman is doing the I said, what did you do to deserve this? Did you have to sit there and type this entire book? Just that keeps me busy, So, hey, all right. But it's not something they could send me the whole book at one time. It's just we're doing it piecemeal, one chapter at a time, one section at a time. The player register was the first thing we did, and that took us from last February until the fall to actually do that. That was because it was like one letter at a time. Here's the A's, and I would have more information than I had. We kind of switched it up a little bit, took the games played section out because we didn't really have a lot of that. And to me, it's like, if you don't have it, what's the point? It's just, you just have a blank space there. You had the NFL stuff, sure, but WFL, you didn't have it. I'm like, and so we decided, now let's take that section out, save ourselves a little space. But I've got a lot more. What I did was I added transactions that occurred after they left the WFL. Like they signed with Atlanta in '75 after after they left the WFL, and then this kind of that thing, and that was looking up the old Sporting News football register, if you remember those, and doing that. And again, newspapers.com again is an amazing resource for that. So yeah,
it definitely is. I use that quite a bit. I'm gonna have to get you on, and we're gonna have to, because we're gonna be we go through some early football teams and some defunct football teams on Pigskin Dispatch. Right now we're going through the AAFC. We just started it, but I'm planning on doing a WFL, and I was looking for an expert, and I think I just found one. Maybe can have you on and some visit, and we'll reminisce some more about that league coming up. But Mark, I really appreciate your time today, sharing about not only all your great books that you've done. We're going to delve into those in some Pigskin Dispatch episodes, I'm sure. But talking about this Kessler's baseball guide, really appreciate that, and you sharing the memories with us tonight. And we thank you for that.
Thank you, Darren. I really appreciate again having me on and letting me bend your ear for quite a while. So, I appreciate it.
Sorry, but my pitching coach just called timeout, and he's coming out to the mound. I think I'm going to get yanked for a reliever. We'll see you back tomorrow for some more great sports history on Sports Jersey Dispatch Podcast. We invite you to check out our websites, jerseydispatch.com and pigskindispatch.com. Not only see the daily sports history, but to experience the preservation of great events and people that play the games. Find us on Pigskin Dispatch. It's also on social media outlets on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all your daily sports history. Pigskin Dispatch is happy to be associated with the Sports History Network, the sports headquarters of yesteryear, found at sportshistorynetwork.com.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
At the Sports History Network, we're all about sports yesteryear, and so we're so pleased to introduce you to Row One, an online memorabilia gallery and shop that brings your sports history to life anywhere. The Row One gallery includes over 5,200 gorgeously reproduced prints of team posters, game program covers, game tickets, advertisements, and more in baseball, pro and college football, pro and college basketball, and more. And any gallery item may be printed in a variety of sizes on wood, metal, canvas, acrylic, or poster paper. And in Row One shop, check out the thousands more of unique items with the retro and historical designs dating back to 1876, including t-shirts, long sleeve shirts, phone cases, mugs, blankets, pillows, towels, and even shower curtains. Go to sportshistorynetwork.com, ROW1, for access to the full Row One catalog and for gallery prints and gift items, plus get a 15% discount off all prints on the Row One Pictorum Gallery with coupon code SHN15. Follow the link on the show notes.